So happy International Women's Day. It was actually yesterday, March the 8th. This marks the 109th anniversary of International Women's Day being celebrated since the early 1900s. Now, the United Nations recognized it officially in 1977. But women have always, even before the call for International Women's Day, have always recognized their importance in our communities, our societies, in politics and governments, and surely in our homes. And surprisingly enough, here we are on March the 9th, and our government has not acknowledged, Minister Seymour, John Seymour, has not acknowledged International Women's Day in his formal capacity. So there's been no statement received as of yet regarding International Women's Day. It's customary for government officials to issue statements marking, international days of celebration. Why International Women's Day would be any exception to that general practice, I have no idea. But it is quite telling at a time like this, when in our community, we are struggling to accept that gender equality is something that we still are nowhere near close to actually being successful at. And there are times when that inequality is highlighted in a very real way. So as many of you know, over a week ago, some women in the Cayman Islands got together and had a peaceful protest on the steps, almost literally on the steps of the government administration building right next door, to really send a clear message to the government of the Cayman Islands that we are women, we're strong, we're part of this community, we're actually the majority portion of this community, and we want our voices heard. We don't want to be victims of abuse in our workplace, in our homes. We want equality when it comes to even the pay gap and so on. So yesterday, as many women around the world celebrated International Women's Day, our government didn't. It's not because they were in crisis mode late into the evening with the dump fire. That didn't happen until quite some time later. One would assume that the minister has a content calendar and that his chief officers, secretaries, numerous people are assisting him with making sure that the content is available and there for these different types of events. So why the ball was dropped on this particular day, whether it was purposely done so or inadvertently done so as an oversight, we don't actually know. But we do think and believe in this video tutorial here today that it is an oversight that speaks volumes about this current government in general and about Minister Seymour in particular, and quite a few other ministers in particular who form this PPM-led coalition government. So it was, I was waiting all day and I thought, this is strange. We haven't received anything from GIS. We don't hear from the minister on International Women's Day. Are there any celebrations that are ongoing? We do know that March is, the month of March is celebrating women throughout the entire month. But this day, when countries around the world were celebrating, there were peaceful protests and marches all over the world, in Paris, in Mexico, in Belarus, in Pakistan, Iran, in America, all over the world, women were letting their voices be heard on this very important issue. And so we see some of the protest marches here. Mexico was extremely powerful because in the case of Mexico, they actually have a huge number of women that are being killed. Violence towards women is a significant issue in their community that they are struggling to continue to work with and to find resolutions for. And so this is the photo here from Mexico, where again, they're highlighting the number of, proportionately higher number of women that are massacred in Mexico every single day. And there were additional protests, like I said, in most countries around the world. People were demonstrating and showing their support of gender equality. They are hopeful that we can get closer and close the gap that continues to really, make us less than equal partners in so many different ways. So progress is what International Women's Day is all about. It's celebrated on an annual basis on March the 8th, and it's meant to celebrate women's achievement throughout history. And like I said, the United Nations actually recognized it formally in 1977. The gender inequality impacts us as women in so many different ways. So women around the world are more likely to be victims of rape and assault than their male counterparts. Women around the world are more likely to, have to deal with unequal pay. So on average, we are earning somewhere like 30 to 40% less than our male counterparts. That's generally speaking around the world. Of the 1.3 billion women that live in what is termed absolute poverty, the vast majority of those are actually women. And that is sad because women tend to lead the charge when it comes to running their household, running their communities, being really at the forefront of, when they're permitted to do so, of a lot of movements that bring wonderful social programs, educational programs, and achievements across the board. So women continue to be more likely to be victims of violence, rape, domestic violence, and indeed even workplace-related violence. And that is an unfortunate situation. And the theme for this year's International Women's Day is I Am Generation Equality, Realizing Women's Rights. And so, of course, naturally, this entire discussion got me to thinking about how we as a community are doing, whether we're doing a good job or not, celebrating women, getting that gender gap closed. And naturally, my mind had to turn to more recent events that clearly indicate that we have so far to go, so far to go. So you guys will know what I'm talking about by this point. Over 2 weeks ago, a woman was assaulted. She's a bar manager. She was assaulted at her workplace by the Speaker of the House, Mr. McKeever Bush. I don't think that we need to say allegedly any longer because he's admitted to the assault and an apology letter that he actually wrote. Now, the most amazing thing about this, well, there's a number of things that are amazing about what has transpired, but perhaps the most amazing thing is that no one has been arrested yet, and we are now in excess of 2 weeks. Let me assure you that if myself or anybody else out there had engaged in that type of behavior and assaulted someone, the chances of us being arrested on the spot immediately for the offense of assault would have been almost without question. At the very minimum, you would have been arrested. Then the police carry out their investigation and they go through, the various steps that are involved in putting their case file together in order to submit that to the Director of Public Prosecution's office. They will then make a ruling and advise the police whether or not to charge an individual. So the mere fact that no one has been arrested today, here we are on March 9th, is extremely troubling. The mere fact that our political representatives, both male and female, but in particular the 3 female representatives, have failed to make any sort of meaningful statement on this particular issue is something that continues to stand out in my mind as well as the mind of other people in this community. So we move forward celebrating International Women's Day and a bunch of other events in the month of March celebrating women, looking to get that closer to gender equality, but realizing that here we are in the Cayman Islands and we are definitely not equal by any stretch of the imagination. So we are subjected to violence at the hands of men in our community. Sometimes these men are known to us. Other times it's just a casual relationship. They're clients, they're customers, and they feel that they can abuse us and talk to us in any kind of way, and indeed even physically violate us, and there's nothing that will be done about it. Last week was an interesting week on the political front because a number of things transpired. Mr. Kenneth Bryan a week ago indicated that he actually wanted to wait until there was some sort of a progression in the criminal case. He didn't really say at what stage, but he wanted the criminal case to proceed before he actually made a decision or a move towards joining everybody else on the backbench who wanted to have a special meeting of the Legislative Assembly in order to consider a vote of no confidence. I was disappointed in Mr. Bryan's statement and his decision. I remain disappointed in that statement and that decision for a number of reasons, really. Number one, that statement failed in my mind to recognize that there is a clear distinction between Mr. Bush and his personal persona and Mr. Bush as a political leader and Speaker of the House. So in fact, what we have here is, on the one hand, in your personal life, there will be some level of accountability, possibly. There's definitely a legal process that hopefully he will have to go through. But again, anybody else would have already started the legal process, as Mr. Bryan is well aware, because he himself has found himself arrested for assault. And his arrest didn't happen a month later. It didn't happen 2, 3, 4 weeks later. He was arrested on the spot as the incident occurred. Because an arrest doesn't speak to your guilt or innocence. An arrest merely means that you were arrested on suspicion of something. And the evidence, the overwhelming evidence that there was an assault that night exists because there were eyewitnesses, multiple eyewitnesses. There should have been CCTV footage that confirmed an assault had taken place. And if nothing else, Mr. Bush has now copped to the assault himself and admitted that he did assault her. The reasoning for him assaulting her is of little consequence in terms of, did the assault actually take place? So there's that component, the criminal legal side of things. However, that is separate and apart from what will transpire for him in his actual position as a representative and a Speaker of the House. And so there are expectations that we have of the people that we elect to public office. Those are well respected. They're supposed to be well respected positions. They come with a decent salary that most of us would never see in a month. Most people are not going to see $8,000 to $12,000 a month. They come with privileges, travel privileges on the dime of the public purse, pension and health benefits coming out of the public coffers, all sorts of additional benefits that we could go into further detail and discuss. But there's also that very important component of, it also comes with certain responsibility. So you have a responsibility as an elected official to carry yourself in a respectable manner and to not engage in certain behavior. And it is that commingling of those two very separate aspects of what has transpired here that I believe Mr. Bryan has missed the mark on. So his focus is on Mr. Bush, the individual. Let's not remember now that there was no mention in that letter about the victim and her rights and her due process and what she can expect as a victim of violence in the workplace to have come about as a result of this. This was all focused on, oh, I want to give Mr. Bush, Mr. McKeever, William McKeever Bush, the benefit of the doubt in this situation. That's fine. You can give him the benefit of the doubt. You can allow the legal process to work without interference, which that should happen in any event anyway. But that has nothing to do with, on the other hand, holding him accountable as an elected official of the Cayman Islands, and more importantly, as a Speaker of the House. Now, Mr. Bryan should be well aware, again, from his own personal experiences, that when his situation came about, he went through his legal process and there was no interference and no apparent interference in that legal process. However, professionally, the same Premier, Alden McLaughlin, who's unwilling to hold the Speaker of the House accountable, actually held him Kenneth Bryan accountable at that time. He said, Kenneth is my political analyst or political assistant or whatever the official title was, which is a political appointment that he was getting paid and had an office in the government building. And this impacts his position and his ability to do that job without reputational damage. And so the premier made the decision to fire him. A lot of people felt it was premature and it shouldn't have been done, et cetera, et cetera. And imagine, Kenneth Bryan was not yet an elected official. So it's still not the same situation from that perspective. Now let's look at other similar political situations. This would be if Mr. Bush is, if there's a vote of no confidence brought against Mr. Bush, this would be the third such time that a vote of no confidence has been brought against Mr. Bush. The first time was in the late 90s when he was removed, I think, as Minister of Tourism, and he may have been leader of government business at that particular time for his involvement in the first Cayman Bank failure and fiasco. There were no criminal charges that came about as a result of that. He was never arrested in relation to that. But again, his position that he was in, leader of government business, leader of tourism, Minister of Tourism, came under a cloud of suspicion and disrepute, and that led to his removal by his party, and I think the governor at the time may have had a role to play in that. Now let's fast forward a little bit. We saw Mr. Bush being removed again when he was arrested in relation to allegations about misuse of the government credit card. His own government of the day, his supporters, Dwayne Seymour, who's now a minister, Juliana O'Connor Connolly, who is now a minister as well, other people like Rolston and CG and whoever was in at the time, they made the decision to remove Mr. Bush at that particular time, again, because it made the UDP look bad and there was this whole political cloud hanging over them, and that was a problem. So once again, they removed him as leader of government business, repositioned and reshuffled all of their ministerial responsibilities, and some people became interim ministers who really should have never been ministers. But nonetheless, that was the decision that was made. So again, back in 2001, we saw Mr. Bush deciding that Kurt Tibbetts was unfit for public office, not because Kurt Tibbetts had assaulted anyone, not because he was being accused of committing any crime, none of that at all, but simply because, he wasn't doing a good enough job, we're not happy with the direction the country's going, and he's spending all of his time hanging out at the bars drinking. And that very flimsy reason was enough to remove Kurt Tibbetts as leader of government business and to remove Edna Moyle as one of his ministers, because she would not get on board with basically what was termed a coup of the government at that time, a vote of no confidence, and he was kicked out and sent to the backbench. So when Kenneth Bryan says in his arguments that he's just trying to give him a fair chance because he's aware from his own personal experience what it's like to have people prejudge you without the benefit of a fair trial, et cetera, I don't quite think that Kenneth is understanding that there is a differentiation between a person in their individual capacity having the right to due process, having the right to, all that comes with that, legal representation, et cetera, and that person remains innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. That is very different from bringing disrepute to your position as an elected official of this country and as the Speaker of the House being the third highest position in the country. So from that perspective, it causes a lot of concern. And the broader message that people think is being supported, which again, Kenneth has attempted to distance himself with, is that it really flies in the face of the victims in general, and this whole topic of violence against women, inequality against women. And the irony of the situation is when Kenneth was arrested, he was actually arrested for trying to defend a woman in a situation where she was being abused by someone known to her. So there seems to be some contradiction. The opposition has said, listen, they can't support that. I should first say that the first person to come out of the gate with a statement was Mr. Ezra Miller. And I take my hats off to Ezra for that. He made a statement first and indicated that, at the end of the day, he cannot support anyone that does this, but especially one of his colleagues in what is supposed to be the respected legislative assembly. Positions that come with a great deal of respect and responsibility. And there are young people out there, young professionals, young everyone, who looks up to those elected officials to set an example by which they should be conducting themselves and how they should be operating. And if you can go out there in public and beat someone up and 2-3 weeks later you've still not been held to account in no respect at all, you've not been arrested, nothing has happened, well, why wouldn't we all just go out there and beat people up? Because, well, there are those of us who think it's wrong. Those of us who have a moral compass, that even if we're not going to be punished for something, we know that assaulting someone, in particular when you're a big man, assaulting a woman, is just the wrong thing to do. That's not what you do. That's not how you treat women. So the other point of contention in relation to that, of course, is that there is this apology that's out there that basically has admitted a lot of what transpired. Some of the details are questionable. The reasons why it may have happened doesn't matter, in my opinion. The fact that it happened is what matters. But even in that letter, Mr. Bush has admitted to having mental health concerns for the past 5 years, which causes me to wonder about a lack of poor judgment in handling your own business. Because listen, we all have struggles from time to time in our lives, psychological and otherwise. But if you're not in a position to recognize that your struggles are causing your behavior to, go down the gutter and cause other people harm and cause other people, significant losses, then that in and of itself says a lot about your inability to manage your personal affairs. So maybe you should not be managing the affairs of the country. And then taking on the added responsibility of being Speaker of the House. It's very unfortunate, but we have heard, if we wanted to be honest about the situation, we will admit that we have heard of numerous cases of Mr. Bush's inappropriate behavior towards women in particular that date back way before the 9 years that he claims that he's been suffering from mental and depression and concerns that, as he put in his words, will now require him to seek out long-term professional help. So that alone, I thought, was quite peculiar, in that Mr. Kenneth did not address what that means in his mind. So you've got a representative of the people, you've got someone who's Speaker of the House, who sometimes, even in their position as Speaker of the House in that chair, makes decisions and carries on in such a way that some of us think, well, that's not very professional now, is it? But this person is now telling you that they have a problem and they need long-term professional help. Why wouldn't you vote to remove that person in their capacity as Speaker of the House so that they can then seek out and get the attention that they need and focus entirely and wholly on that, as opposed to having all this added responsibility and being distracted by the politics of the country? There are other people who can run the country. There are other people who can sit in the position of Speaker of the House and do a perfectly good job without this cloud over them of, oh, I need to be able to manage my anger, my depression, my drinking, and all of these issues. So it is quite unfortunate. Mr. Kenneth has indicated that he is, following the advice of his constituents. We will see how that plays out and what they think. So far, I've found very few constituents who have made comments to me privately or even publicly, that they are actually in support of this decision. And again, you know, there has to be that separation of Mr. Bush as an individual and what his individual rights and entitlements are, and Mr. Bush as a political leader of this country and holding that post of Speaker of the House. So International Women's Day, I want to wish all of you as women, I hope that you had a wonderful International Women's Day. Enjoy the rest of the month celebrations. Again, I'm very, very disappointed that we have not heard from our minister. We've had no statement about International Women's Day. I don't know if him and his team have actually forgotten about this, but it's such an important day to be celebrated. We need to do more than just celebrate that day. We need to take positive actions that ensure the quality gap and the gender violence that occurs in this country on a daily basis is addressed, and real measures are put in place to protect women who are far more likely to be victims of this type of abuse. I have a daughter. Many of you have daughters. I am a woman. All of us came from a woman. And there are women, you know, that have influenced our lives in all sorts of positive ways, whether it be our grandmothers or aunts or teachers. And we have to continue to lift them up and to celebrate them for the wonderful contributions that they have made to our societies. And, you know, with all due respect, the women tend to be the fiber and the glue that holds this community together. Our men for many years were shipped off to sea. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them are being shipped off to northward to prison. And it's the women who are holding the fort down. It's the women who are, you know, as single parents, as a single mother, running the household and ensuring that their children have the opportunities available to them to have a decent life. And that should include being free from violence and any sort of fear of violence. I have been fortunate enough to not have ever experienced that type of violence in my life at the hands of a man, and I hope that that never happens. I certainly would not want that for my daughter or anybody else for that matter. It has to be a very horrific experience to be victimized in such a way, to be disrespected in such a way, and to be discarded in such a way. And when it happens in such a public arena, to know that there's so many people who will stand by and ask the question, well, what did she do? What did the victim do to deserve this? Surely she must have done something. You know, is it because, as has been circulated incorrectly, by the way, that she is a lesbian, or she is this, or she is that? I mean, it's very disrespectful on so many different levels. And yes, you can rally behind a victim and what happened to her and hold that person accountable, and still know that the legal process will be fair and equitable, and that person will have no fear of being prejudged in that way. Chances are he's going to get off. We all feel that way. We all feel that there'll be no real accountability in the legal arena. Now, whether or not the people of this country decide in 2021 to hold people accountable for their decisions as it relates to this particular topic and many other issues that we're facing, time will tell. So again, happy International Women's Day. I wanted to leave you guys with a little bit of a song that many, many years ago, my good friend Kevin Dawkins actually did for me. The backdrop of the song is I'm Every Woman, and he kind of customized it for me for one of my campaign runs that says Sandra's Every Woman. And, you know, we all need to have that sort of, you know, go get it kind of song, that motto, whether it's a song or a theme or whatever, that we try to live our lives by as women. There's nothing wrong with being strong. When women are strong, our communities are stronger, our governments are stronger, our children are stronger. But unfortunately, for a lot of us, especially in the Caribbean, we live in environments where people still think that there's something wrong with the strong woman. We're labeled, we're called all sorts of names, and we're not appreciated for the strength that a woman should have and the positive things that can come from a very strong woman. So I wanted to just leave you guys again with that. I hope that you have enjoyed this social commentary. This is our video editorials. I also want to publicly thank Mr. Quincy Brown, who has submitted a number of video editorials recently, and welcome you to do the same. Anyone can submit a video editorial. Simply get in contact with us, record your video any way that you want, Tell the people what you're thinking, and we'd love to share it on our social media platforms.
Whatever you need, anything but time was done, sad, no do it naturally. But she's everything, she's all you need. She's all you need. She's all you need. Anything you want that she's all you need. Everything she right comes up down. That's me. She's working hard to serve for me. On election day, vote with no pen for number 2. The dress is big, oh, she's baby boy. She's all you need. Anything you want to be, she's all you need.